Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, thank you.
All right, so it is 12:01 and people are still filtering in, but we're going to get started. So welcome to today's webinar on BirdCast, when and where birds migrate. And I really want to thank everyone in our audience for joining us today. Closed captioning is available. If you click on the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen, you can turn those subtitles on. We're streaming both within Zoom and onto the lab's Facebook page. So we have two audiences tuning in today, which is great and allows us to have a really broad reach. So we're excited to have both audiences. If you want to share the webinar with other people who might not have registered on Zoom, my colleague is going to enter the Facebook page into the Zoom chat. So you can send that over to your friends and family and they can join the webinar on Facebook. So today's webinar is a latest in a series from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Visitor Center. Throughout the summer, we've been highlighting mobile apps, citizen science programs, and different projects. Today's topic is BirdCast. It's a collaborative research project between the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Colorado State University, and the University of Massachusetts Amherst. It has its own website, which is birdcast.info. And as you'll see today, this website is one you're going to want to be checking frequently, especially now at the start and some places the peak of migration, which we'll get into throughout the webinar. BirdCast is short for Bird Forecast, because they are literally forecasting the migratory movements of birds on a national level. So we're going to do some introductions. There's three of us today. We'll take turns briefly saying who we are, our role at the lab, and I'm going to kick it off. So my name is Chelsea Benson. I'm the Public Program Coordinator with the lab's Visitor Center, which means I'm an educator at heart. And my job is to share the lab's amazing resources with all of you that are joining us in our audience. I really enjoy checking in on BirdCast. Right now, it's really exciting, and I can't wait for them to share what they're seeing and predicting. But I'm not intimately involved in the project. So I'm just here to facilitate the conversation with Adrian and Julia. So Adrian, do you want to take it next and introduce yourself?
Sure, Chelsea, yeah. So my name is Adrian Dokter. I'm a research associate here at the Lab of Ornithology. And I'm mostly a migration ecologist. So I study sort of a very specific part of the life of birds. And that's when they move around, each spring and each fall. So I joined the lab about 4 years ago. I have a lifelong interest in birds. If you hear a little accent, that's right. So I'm originally from the Netherlands. I grew up in Haarlem, a small city close to the city of Amsterdam. But very happy to be in the US now and working here with my colleagues here on the BirdCast project. Yeah.
Great. Julia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia, and I'm a BirdCast project leader. I joined the lab at the beginning of the year. And I primarily work in Texas to help manage and coordinate on-the-ground conservation efforts that use BirdCast research in order to try and minimize threats to birds. I'm a lifelong animal lover, but a pretty novice birder. And I come to the lab with a background in government with a particular interest in public policy and conservation.
Great. Thanks to you both for sharing that. Before we get too far into the webinar, I want to explain to our audience how the webinar works. So in a moment, I'm going to kick off with a series of questions to Adrian and Julia so they can get us all on the same page about what is BirdCast and how it works and why it's important for research and conservation efforts. And then we're going to transition to questions from the audience. So for our Zoom audience, if you have questions, you can add them to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Some of you have already figured out how to do that. You guys are so Zoom savvy. If you see a question that you really want answered, please click the thumbs up icon because that will upvote that question and we'll bring it to the top so that we see it. We can also type in our responses. So we will be periodically answering questions. And when we type in a response, it actually goes into that answered column, and you can check for our responses there. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can add your comments or questions to the Facebook comment box. And I have colleagues that are monitoring that and sharing those questions with us. So please add your questions and we'll get to as many as you can. If you're using the Zoom chat, we won't be answering questions from there, but if you are having technical difficulties, you can add that information there and my colleagues will try to help you with that. All right, so Adrian, could you give us a big picture overview of BirdCast? What's the goal of the project and what are you attempting to do and why?
Yeah, so very generally speaking, I would say BirdCast tries to give you sort of the best information on a very hidden and important part of the life of birds, and that is their migrations. And their migrations, they basically happen mostly at night. It's a true spectacle. So each season there's like billions of birds moving across the country and migrating over the continent, but it's a very hidden thing. And like birds migrate, also almost 80% of the species migrate at night. And they also fly often at very high altitudes of like up to 10,000 feet high. So you don't really see it. And I think that is one thing that we really try to do, to really bring, so to sort of visualize and bring that information to you so that we can actually see these birds moving. Now, I think radar and weather radars, they can detect birds in the night sky. It doesn't matter whether it's day or night. And so that those tools, those radars are a very central part of our methodology. So I think on the one hand it's information, on the other hand we also really want to do something with that information, and that is sort of to use the information that we have on the migrations of birds to make a difference sort of on the ground and actually try to save some birds. And I think Julia is really, that is really where Julia's project comes in, and maybe I can hand it over to her to tell a bit about that.
Sure. So like Adrian was saying, in addition to the goal of providing information on mass migration of birds at night, there's also the goal of using that information for conservation efforts, or what we refer to on our website as science to action, which is what I primarily focus on. Since we know more birds die during migration than any other period in their life, we need to be particularly concerned about mitigating threats that occur during migration. And so the idea is that if we know where birds are going to be during migration on a sort of night-to-night basis, then we can communicate that information to the relevant stakeholders in advance of these movements and dynamically mitigate the hazards that birds might otherwise encounter. And we can do so in a very targeted way that balances the needs of and minimizes disruptions to these stakeholders.
It's really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Today, we're talking a lot about radar maps and forecasts and other really visual things. And I can see a lot of questions popping on about what do the color of the maps mean. All that stuff is available on the BirdCast website, which I understand just got a brand new look yesterday, I believe, right? So
very new.
the latest and greatest for all our audience to see the new website. So Adrian, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen and just kind of walking us through what we're looking at and kind of telling us what might be useful for our audience when they look at these maps.
Yeah, so let me see. Is this working? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's really perfect time. On 1st of September, migration really starts to kick off a little bit. It's the official start of the meteorological autumn. And we have a really nicely timed that also our website has a very nice redesign with many people worked very hard to make to have this come out in a very short amount of time, but we're really happy with how it looks. And I kind of want to talk you briefly through all the different parts of this website. I would say there's sort of three components to the BirdCast website, and that's what we call the migration tools. We have forecasts that you see here. We have local migration alerts, and we have live migration maps. And I think I kind of want to actually go in the reversed order, maybe talk a bit about them in the reversed order. starting with the live migration maps. So maybe let's just dive into a map of last night. So this is sort of our basic information, where a lot of the other information, the other forecasts are based on. So what you see in all these little green and red dots on this map, those are the weather radar stations of the United States. They're called sort of WSRs, are they called, weather surveillance radars. And these are sort of the same, those are the same radars that you see when you look at the weather map, or when you see the weather on the news. This is the system that sort of tracks hurricanes and tornadoes, and sort of funny, but like radar ecologists, we sometimes like to say they're weather surveillance radars. WSRs, they're also actually wildlife surveillance radars, because it's not only weather that these radars see. They also detect birds, insects, a lot of any animal that is moving through the air we will pick up as well. So to read this map, we have all the little dots, which are the radar stations. They're green is when they're active, typically, and red is when they're down. And here you see also actually in Louisiana, funny to point out that these two radars here in Louisiana are down. And that is actually, this is where the hurricane passed last week. And one of these radars got totally destroyed. So yeah, the damage there was very big. And it also leaves a little hole now in our migration maps. So you can sort of play the last night migration, and then you see what is happening in the night sky. So radars, they sort of send out a big pulse of radio. It's sort of the same as listening to radio on your radio, but now it's sort of a pulse that we send out and that the radars detect, and then you can sort of see where the birds are in the night sky. So I paused it now, and you see sort of a very big blob of migration here with these very bright colors. So the intensity of the colors tells you how many birds are in the sky, and how many birds are migrating, while the arrows tells you the direction in which they are flying. And sort of by gluing together these different 143 radars over the whole US, we can sort of make now these composite maps of migration. So if you tune in tonight, you'll see that this map is actually sort of 20 minutes behind real time. You can really follow what's happening in the night sky. So I see some questions coming by. Actually, what do these colors now mean? Maybe I can spend one word about that. Like here you see now these colors are sort of yellow, and you can read here on the scale what that means. So there's about 5, and then it's thousands per kilometer per hour. So what that means is that if you would draw a line on the ground here of about a 1 kilometer wide, and you would wait for 1 hour, and you count all the birds that are flying over that 1 kilometer line that you drew on the ground up above you over night sky, that would give you the number of birds that are passing. So in this case, it's 5,000 birds per kilometer per hour. If you would look at the width of this sort of yellow blob, that's about 500 kilometers. So that's really 500 times 5,000 is like, what is it? Is it 250,000 birds per hour? So it really gives you a way to also put a number on it and to quantify how many birds are migrating through the night sky. And these radars have been running almost 20 years, 25 years. That is when the radar network was built. And we have a lot of these historical data and a lot of these historical maps. So sort of a second really major component, and then I will go to the second migration tool, is sort of the forecasts that you see at the beginning of the website in sort of the same colors. And these forecasts tell you sort of not what's happening right now or what has happened in the sky, but they tell you in advance what we expect for migration to happen. So this is for the night of tomorrow. The second figure is for the day after tomorrow, and the third night is And I'm excited about this night, especially if you're living in the Midwest. You see this huge bright spot here coming in the night of the 3rd of September. And so to give you a bit of an insight how this works is we have sort of, basically these models are built on top of a weather model that tells you how warm it's going to be, what are the winds are, and the winds and the speeds and the directions of the wind. And birds are super sensitive to these meteorological conditions. They sort of are really clever. They sort of fly when they have good tailwinds because then they can travel very efficiently. And sort of what we've done is like we have we sort of gave a computer these weather maps and the observed bird migration that we detected with the radar. And for 20 years, we sort of let the computer look at which weather patterns are associated with which bird migration patterns. And then we taught sort of this sort of machine learning model to be able to predict actually in advance how many birds are migrating. So basically how this works is that we take a weather forecast for in 3 days. We know the winds and the temperatures. We give that to that prediction model, and then we produce this map of when and where birds are migrating. So it's really built on top of a weather model, and that allows us to make these forecasts because the computer has learned which weather conditions are associated with strong migration of birds. I'm talking a lot here. I think I want to.
Hey, Adrian, I had a quick question. Somebody in the Q&A wondered why in the live migration maps are there some black areas? So we were wondering, like, what's that mean?
So yeah, that happens. Like typically, is when this is, for example, very early. Then there's simply no migration. That can be it. But also, what can happen is that it's, for example, raining, and when it's raining, typically birds don't fly through areas of rain. But to be honest, we also cannot really see birds through rain. So usually when it's raining, the station sees no birds anymore and it blacks out. So it's either one of the two. There's either no birds, but often when you see sort of a sort of limited area, it might be that there's just a sort of heavy thunderstorm moving through that area, and that therefore the radar doesn't see any birds anymore.
Very cool. Also, I think people are wondering, like, how do you separate weather from birds and from like other biological things like insects and bats and things? Like, how do we know that it's birds that you're seeing on those maps?
Right. Oh yeah, that's a very good question. So yeah, it has been actually a very long discussion also among meteorologists and people on the radar. I mean, we really in the past didn't know what they were. So it's actually not a trivial thing to figure out, but we've really learned that especially at night, there's very strong evidence that all these blobs that you see are really dominated by birds. So there's sort of two options. It's very clear from the signatures of the radar that it's biological. And one of the main challenges we have is it then birds or is it insects? And we found more and more that really at night it's really dominated birds. And you can see that, for example, from the speed. If you compare the speed of the radar also measures the speed of the birds. And if you compare that to the wind, for example, you see that the targets have like a speed of like 15 meters per second or like 30 or 40 kilometers an hour, sometimes even like 60 or 70 miles an hour. They can go super fast, these tiny birds, by using the wind. But you can still see that they have their own speed relative to the wind. And if it's like 15 meters per second, that's much faster than an insect could ever fly. So that's how we really sure that these are birds and not something else.
Very cool. I'm also wondering, and I think this is part of your new website, maybe you could show us, like, the upper Midwest is going to have a really hot migration night in September 3rd.
Yeah.
Like, how, like, if people, like, can people like look, they can look at the map, but I think there is like an alert that you could get for like a hot spot for migration. Is that on their website? Yeah,
that's right. So like if you want to be more, if you want to zoom in, for example, this is the 3rd of September, you see here in the Midwest, near Chicago, it's super hot. So say if you're living in a certain city, and I'm not going to pick Chicago, for example, and then you want to know what's the migration forecast going to be, then you kind of sort of get a summary of those maps specific for your location for the upcoming 3 nights. So tonight is not going to be very interesting there in Chicago, very low. Wednesday is starting to peak up, but especially Thursday, you see we have these very high numbers of birds that are predicted to move through this area. So this you can use to sort of zoom in to your specific city and see what's the forecast. And of course, we can use then the forecast to maybe, to make a difference. I think in the fact that I think this is a big thing, and I want to give a shout out also to Benjamin Van Doren and Kyle Horton. They are both collaborators here at the BirdCast project, who has put a lot of time in generating these forecasts. And I think it really changes the game a little bit. That to be able now to make a forecast makes also that you can potentially change something, or that we as humans can change what we do to be able to have these birds travel safely through the night sky. As Julia said already, we know that migration is one of the most dangerous periods in the life of a bird, and we want to make sure that they can continue to do so.
Great. I think that, Julia, if you would kind of speak a little bit more about, like, to maybe the bird watchers in the audience, like if they're looking at this website and looking at the maps, do you have any like tips for them as they're thinking about going birding?
Yeah, this is also something I'm interested in at the moment as I try and become a better birder. And so what you want to do here is go to the forecast maps that we just checked out. And take a look at the keys, and basically you want to be looking for high migration, but not only high migration, because that doesn't necessarily indicate an excellent day of birding so much as birds passing overhead, but optimally high migration intersecting with our precipitation lines, because when those intersect, then you might see some migration fallout and an abundance of birds in one area the next morning.
Ooh, that's a really good tip. So combine the radar with your own weather forecast and looking for...
Sorry to clarify, the precipitation lines are already marked on the forecast. So you just have to check out where the little gray and white lines are and the little
That's
gray
right. I did see those like gray and white circular lines. So that's the precipitation. So you're looking for where it intersects.
Yeah, with like the sort of brighter areas on the map that indicate high migration.
I think Adrian's going to show us.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is super.
A little clarity.
That's what I love this. It's super visual. So I think, being able to share this so that people know exactly how to use these tools is great.
Yeah, so here you see little indications of high or moderate or light predicted precipitation. And we hope to also bring these kind of observations of precipitation in the live maps, but I have a long to-do list. And that's definitely something we also want to do, but that's not there yet. And I think it's important also when you look at the live map, for example, the radar shows you when there's a lot of birds in the air, right? And that can mean two things. That means like either all the birds are leaving from your area, or they are all coming towards your area. And if you look at the live maps, you can sometimes see that maybe if you see a lot of birds leaving early in the night and then it really thins out later in the night, then probably there was a net loss of birds. So more birds probably left than arrived. But if there's a huge pulse and that continues through the whole night, and then there's a big chance that there's going to be a lot of birds arriving. And then I get really excited because I want to go birding.
Yep, that's so true. So Adrian, could you tell us a little bit about what you've learned as you've been studying these bird migrations with radar and forecasts? Like, what are some of the scientific discoveries that your team has made? Yeah,
so there's a lot. And I think one thing I've been interested in is also like how, is there any change over time? And I think that's a unique opportunity that we have with the radar data, because they go back like 25 years. And so you might think like, why didn't we do this 10 years ago? That's actually because like it's just maybe the internet revolution and the fact that we have so many computers now and so easy, the radar data are huge and you need like huge cloud computation and huge stores to actually process and analyze these data. And that's in this day and age, that's almost much easier. And that's why we have made so much progress recently. So one of the things I've worked on is it has to be that pass through. And yeah, it's a little sad story. Like there is actually a very clear, if you do that every year and you count how many birds have flown over any area in the US, you see that there's, it declines with about 1% per year. And since 2007, it's about over 10% loss of the number of migrants. And of course, that's a worrying thing. Like, I think that radar and weather radar, of course, it's mostly the common birds that we are detecting with the radar. Because the radar really detects sort of biomass. It's almost to think of like the number of kilograms of meat that pass through. We don't really see individual birds, or we cannot see any species. It's really the net mass that we're measuring. Well, that is declining. That is very worrisome. And that was one big surprise. And we combined that also with a lot of ground studies. Maybe people have heard about the 3 billion birds that were lost. That was part of that same study where we looked at the declines of birds. So that's a big insight. Another thing that I think is very interesting is that we also learn, like, what is a real power of radar data is that you can put a number to it. How many birds are moving in and out of the US? And we made sort of wild guesses, but it was hard to put a number on it. And now we can do that. You can see, for example, how many birds are flying to South America, how many birds leave the US. And then we can look in the next spring, like how many birds are coming back. And you typically will see that there's fewer birds coming back, of course, than left in the fall, because they lived for half a year, they've been dying, and so there's always mortality. But that we can compare the numbers between spring and fall really allows us to look into like when and in which numbers are birds dying, and in which years were the really successful breeding years, because we see lots of birds coming back. So these kind of things are really exciting to be able to look at. And I think also what is really unique is that we now get this really large overview of the whole continent. So we see these biomass flows of birds coming in through the center of the country, and then in the fall they sort of take these more easterly routes, more through the northeast, and these routes of the birds are not the same in spring and fall. And that's also important if you think about how do these migration flows intersect with areas where humans are living, like cities. We can really start to pinpoint what are the areas and what are the times of the year when birds migrate through our cities and the areas where humans live, and when we potentially have the biggest impact on them and might be able to influence them.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify one point. So you're saying that the fall and the spring migration routes can differ for the birds.
Yeah.
That's something that might be surprising for people.
Yeah. So if you would think, like in spring, the real highway through the US, I would say, is sort of through Texas, all the way through the Midwest. And the reason that they fly there is there's very good southerly winds typically in this area. So they're very clever. They want to have they want a free ride. So they go through the center of the country. And in the autumn, it's a little different. And then actually that good winds in the center of the country are actually opposing winds. So that's not so great anymore. And I think that's one of the reasons that they probably shift towards the east.
Yeah.
And maybe also food, there's more green in the east, and there's a lot of young birds. I mean, the exact causes of why we see these patterns are maybe still up for debate, but it's very clear that there's these eastward shifts in the fall.
That's really interesting. I want to ask Julia a lot of questions about the conservation efforts, but before I do, we have quite a few people from outside the United States joining us, like from within Canada and Central and South America. And I'm getting a lot of questions like, why is the map so US specific? Julia or Adrian, is it there?
Yeah, so I can jump in if you want. Like one of the reasons is that I would love to also see BirdCast and radar data from Canada, but we're simply not there yet. And the reason is maybe twofold. Like a lot of countries, the US has been very quick with opening up all their data and public data by the government so that we can do this work is very important. So all this data is freely available now, and that's why we can do these things. And other countries are also moving in that direction, but it's not always so easy to get access to the data. So that's one reason. Another reason is that Canada has the different types of radars. So they are operating at a different wavelength. And there's just these little differences, and our methods, we're still working on getting our methods to tune also on these different types of radars and expanding north. But we're actively talking to Environment Canada and people there, and yeah, I think a lot of people in Canada are also very excited about seeing that happen also for Canada. So it's on our list of things to do, but I cannot give you a really exact timeline when we.
Oh, shucks. Well, I know, yeah, it's definitely, it's great to be able to have, that collaboration, but we also understand like the technology is different, and you really have to establish these relationships with a lot of agencies to be able to do that. So I'm glad to hear that it's a work in progress. That'll be exciting.
Yeah, and the same is happening. It's happening not only in the US, it's also in Europe. That's where I worked a lot for in the past. There we have the collaboration called NRAM, and in Europe you have even like 50 countries where you have to coordinate. And it's a real challenge because there's all these little differences between countries, and in that sense we're sort of blessed in the US with such a huge country with so many radars and data are all the same. That makes life a lot easier. And secretly it was a little reason why I thought, I'm going to do research now in the US because the makes life so much easier. But,
yeah, come up here to get some good radar. I hear ya. So Julia, lots and lots of people are asking about conservation efforts because like Adrian described, the loss of 3 billion birds. It's tragic. Yeah. And so with all these birds migrating, what can we do? So if you could talk about the Lights Out campaign and some of the other conservation efforts, that would be really wonderful.
Sure. So it ties back to the idea that the most dangerous part of a bird's life is migration. And so in order to react to that and safeguard changing habitats of volant organisms like birds, we need more complex and creative approaches than previous static solutions we've tried, like just land or habitat purchase. So one of the historical challenges in implementing solutions has been the needs of stakeholders, which are often diverse and conflicting over the extended periods that birds are migrating during spring and fall, because that's a period of around 3 months. And a lot of people, even if they're willing to help, don't really want to help for that entire period. So now our research provides us this unique opportunity to target effective action in a relatively small window. Of the approximately 3 to 4.5 billion birds that migrate over the US annually each spring and fall, about half of them migrate in a pretty narrow window, often less than 2 weeks in duration. And furthermore, there's a few nights within this period that exhibit the most intense movements, and our migration forecasts can predict those nights. And so using those predictions, we can start to mitigate some of these threats. And these threats include things like light pollution, they include windmills, they include aviation. And so if we can contact stakeholders and alert them in advance with our forecasts and our alerts, then it can be like, hey, maybe you should turn off your lights this night. Maybe you should site your windmills here or turn them off this night. We can give information to airplanes and be like, hey, this is a flock of birds you maybe don't want to fly into tonight. And that allows us to react in real time to these threats. And so the lab is currently involved in a project called Lights Out Texas that we just began earlier this year. And that's to address the light pollution component of migration threats. Light pollution, especially in and around cities where light from buildings and other structures attracts and disorients migrants, it can result in collisions and deaths. And here in the US, up to an estimated 1 billion birds die annually in building strikes, and light pollution is implicated in some of that. And so of the myriad threats that birds are facing, this one has a pretty simple solution. Just turn off the lights when birds are flying by. But it's a simple solution with a big impact. So we're trying to get the word out to people so they know what they can do to help and when exactly they can do that to help. We focus our efforts in Texas as it's home to particularly great risk and great conservation opportunity due to an intersection of enormous bird migration and intense light pollution. So about 1 out of every 3 birds that migrate through the US actually passes through Texas. And this amounts to an enormous volume of about 1 billion birds, with half of that movement occurring in just 19 days on average. And in terms of light pollution risk, 3 of the top 10 ranked cities for exposing birds to the hazards of light pollution are actually in Texas, unfortunately. Houston and Dallas ranking number 2 and 3, and San Antonio number 7. And so we really want to let them know, hey, these are when birds are coming by. This is when you can turn off your lights to protect them.
Wow. So you're focusing on Texas because of it's such a hot spot for migration. But you said you can sign up for an alert, but it's only for those regions, right? Are there any other cities that you're hoping to partner with, or like, what's the outlook for your campaign?
Sure. So on a broader scale, Lights Out has existed in sort of scattered campaigns across the country for the last few decades. Began sort of with the FLAP project first in Canada, and now there are about 30 campaigns in different US cities. Previously, there wasn't much in Texas, which is another reason that we're focused on Texas. But we're working with other Lights Out campaigns across the country and in Canada right now to sort of try and better coordinate. And we're hopeful that, by the end of this, that this is just mass alerts and migration information to everyone in the country, really, so that we can protect birds on a countrywide continental scale. And so right now, what we're beginning with in Texas is alerts that go out to people in Houston and Dallas. And so we previously, I believe Adrian was screen sharing our alerts page, and that's the general migration alerts view of it. There's also a Lights Out view of it, a different link, which you can reach from our Signs to Action page and Houston Dallas alerts with particular Houston Dallas Texas information. And so when you go on there, there's a little subscribe button so that you can subscribe to email notifications of when a high alert is activated. And so when that happens, we recommend that you turn off your lights. It's of course optimal if everyone can turn off their lights all throughout migration, but we recognize that's not always possible. So if you just want to be email notified of when it's most important to do so, of when there's a peak migration night, then we can do that for you in Houston and Dallas. And we're looking to expand those notifications outwards in the next couple migration seasons.
That's really cool. So I'm thinking back to like when you showed us the map with to get like your city alerts for like peak migration, or like, we don't have an email notification system for that yet. But if you're kind of checking in to see what's happening in your area, and you're like, oh, when we looked at Chicago, like the 3rd is going to be such a really big night for migration. Like if you're in that area, it makes sense to like take your own personal action to turn off lights and to let others know.
For sure.
So it's a really powerful tool. You did share with me a video, so I was going to cue that up so that people could see. This is a brand new video produced for the Lights Out campaign that Julia and her team worked on. So I'm going to play that. It's going to take me a second. My screen sharing is a little slow. Not for lack of technology, it's like a personal. I'm slow. All right, so let me screen share. Okay. I hope you all can see that. Let me know if you can't. And I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just realized that while that was playing, I don't think people could hear the audio, but they could see it. It was I had my headphones.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a bummer. The audio sounds so pretty. But for all of you people asking about a link to the video, okay, they could hear it. Okay, good.
Okay, good.
I could hear it. And to address the like choppiness on Facebook, if there were any lag issues for any of you, because there were some lag issues for me, this video, it's not actually been publicly posted yet. So we're actually launching on Friday. So this is a bit of a preview for everyone who tuned in, but it will be shared on our Facebook page, on the lab's Facebook page on Friday. And then we would be more than happy to see you guys share that information then.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you for sharing that with us. So I'm thinking about, this is like the lights out is definitely a big part of protecting birds as they come through cities and other urban environments, especially if that video is really highlighting how much window strikes come into play for migrating birds. Are there other efforts that people can make either themselves on a personal level, like at their homes, or like on a broader level? Because I know you're public policy and information, right? So from like a larger scale, like what are some things that could be done to protect migrating birds?
So on a personal level, the most obvious one, my ask is that you turn off your lights during migration, particularly during nights of peak migration. And that can involve outdoor lights, that can involve just drawing blinds to block off indoor lights, that sort of thing. But start with turning off your lights. Beyond that, we'd love to see you asking people in your cities, wherever you live, telling your neighbors, telling city officials, building managers that this is an issue that you care about. Because essentially, the more public pressure, the more that people respond to these campaigns and actually take action. So there are lights out campaigns. There's us in Texas right now, and there are other lights out campaigns which we provide in our resources page on our website. You can check them out on Audubon's lights out page and connect with a local campaign in your area. They'll often have things that you can participate in, like collision monitoring, so that we can gather more data about this problem. And if there's no effort in your area, you can reach out back to us, and we'd be more than happy to help connect you to the resources to start something in your area, because we want to see this grow as much as we can.
Great, thank you. I think we're going to kind of start transitioning into some of our audience Q&A. We have a ton, which is awesome. It's so great to see everybody really asking a lot of questions and thinking deeply on this topic. One thing that comes up a lot is there's a lot of like species specific questions. And I know that BirdCast, like you said, Adrian, you're really looking at mass, like how many birds are migrating at once. And we're not narrowing down on like a certain specific species of bird and its timing or its pathway necessarily. Could you kind of share with our audience how they might find that information? Because I think it would be really useful for them.
Sure, yeah. I think one important other resource, BirdCast, as you said, is really good for like the relationship with weather, when are birds migrating. It's a fairly unpredictable thing. So for these short-term information of when there's migration, that's your go-to tool. If you're more interested in a species and in species-specific routes and when it goes through your area, there are a lot of information is actually now available through a different lab project. It's called the eBird Status and Trend Project. I think this should have its own webinar series, because it's a really cool project too. Well, let me pull it up for a second and share my screen. Wait, where am I?
It's not as easy as it should be, right?
Yeah, so you can just go to ebird.org. It's a great tool. eBird is just a platform to collect citizen science data, and maybe that's also what we hope. Like, look at BirdCast, when is it great to go birding, and then go out, observe your birds, and submit them to eBird. And those species-specific information helps us also enormously in sort of understanding what's happening to these birds, where they are, what their population trends are. So here's a big list of species that you can go through on the eBird status and trends page. So I want to pick maybe a songbird. I have to find a good one, like the barn swallow, for example. And if you go to there, then you can see the abundance maps. But there's also this abundance animation that you can click, and it tells you a bit. See, it extends all the way even to South America if the data is good enough there. Is where are these birds migrating through, and you sort of see the areas when and where they are. So that already gives you a good clue if you've seen something, and whether that is really a bird that is really out of range or that it actually makes sense. This is a really good reference to sort of put your own observations into context of the large scale patterns. So this is all based on eBird observations and people submitting their observations through eBird. It really makes a difference, and it really helps us to do science. So use BirdCast to plan your birding trip and then go e-birding. That's what I would say.
Right. Yeah. I think that's one of the things that, you know, as somebody that works at the lab, that I really love about working at the Lab of Ornithology is that while we might have separate projects and programs, they often feed into each other. So there's a little bit, like BirdCast is helping in this way and eBird can feed it in that way. And so we're getting a really holistic look at birds from lots of different perspectives. And so I think that's pretty exciting. So thank you for sharing that eBird status and trends. So if you're in the audience and you have lots of species specific questions, I really encourage you to use that webpage because it is very valuable tool to think about where their migration pathways are, where they're overwintering, and where their breeding grounds are. It's a really cool look at individual species. Something that's coming through for us is a lot of people might have been surprised that birds migrate at night. Because we often think of, we see Canada geese, for example, like we see them flying in the V during the day. But from what you're saying, the bulk of birds migrate at night. And could you talk a little bit more about night migration?
No, even Canada geese also migrate at night. But then that's again what I said in the beginning. We were hardly aware of it because they're they're flying super high and you don't really notice anything. Maybe one fun thing to do actually that this is true, you can go out at night and if you have a good migration night that BirdCast forecast, I would encourage you to just go out one night and listen very carefully. And all these little songbirds actually, they do make little chip notes. You can hardly hear it, but it's like chip. And if you have a good night, you hear a lot of these little chips. And so that is actually a fun thing to do. And some of our colleagues are working actually on recognizing which species these little chip notes are. But coming back to your question about night migration, there's various reasons why birds are doing that. And I think one important one is simply, it's a really efficient way of spending your time. You have to also fuel your migration, so they have to forage during the day and do all kinds of other things, and then they can have the nighttime free to sort of migrate because they cannot really forage at the night. Also, it's maybe there's fewer predators. You have a lot of cues, like you can see the stars, which and the moon, which we know that birds use to sort of determine where they are and where they have to go. So it's much more information rich at night to know where they are going. I think the right question is actually, why are we seeing birds migrating during the day?
Flip the question. I like that. Yeah, people were asking, so if they're migrating at night, what do they do during the day? And it sounds like from what you're saying, there's rest. And also it takes a lot of energy to migrate. And so they're foraging and restocking their energy. So that makes a lot of sense.
And a Cooper's hawk is maybe much more dangerous during the day. Also, they're also hunting by sight. So if you migrate at night, it's quite a lot more safe as well.
Yeah. Julia, this question came up, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to answer it, is why are birds attracted to the light in cities? So if they're migrating through at night and they get super disoriented by the light, what's going on there?
So it's still a question that we're trying to answer to some degree, but essentially, as Adrian was talking about earlier, birds use natural light signals to navigate. The stars and the moon are really helpful indicators for them. So when they see artificial light, it confuses them and it draws them in much the same way as, honestly, insects are drawn in. So what we've seen in, for instance, the 9/11 tribute in light in New York City, if you're familiar with that, is that these giant light beams, birds will get caught up in them and sort of circle endlessly rather than migrating through. And so they're sort of pulled off their path a little bit and they end up caught in light and maybe not necessarily where they meant to be. And so what often happens then is birds who are distracted, confused, and potentially exhausted by this light will settle in and then face urban threats when they fly out again in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see both from various analysis that's now coming in, like eBird-based analysis, radar-based analysis, that really show that there's just many more birds than you would expect in urban areas. Well, we think of those areas that they're actually not the best habitat, and especially happens in the fall. So potentially also maybe young birds that are still a little naive, they get drawn into these areas where actually it might not be the best area for them. Extreme example is, of course, also New York City, which is actually, Central Park is a really nice habitat for that area. But I think the reason that there's such enormous amounts of birds there is also that it's surrounded by this sort of desert of concrete where they have nowhere to go. So these birds are coming in and then they have only one place to go, and that's to Central Park. So it's the best birding area, one of the best places to see birds, but maybe, because of that effect.
Yeah. And the problem of bird strikes in urban areas is also underappreciated to a great degree because to a large degree, it's not very visible to people. A lot of birds that collide with windows will fall on upper stories, or they'll collide early in the morning or at night, and they'll be swept away by cleaning crews very early in the morning, or they'll be taken by predators. And so a lot of the time you're not seeing the true sort of devastation that occurs.
I think that some people are asking us to kind of revisit like what the other threats are during migration. So sometimes the birds die of natural causes, right? It's a really long journey. They might get sick, injured, not get enough food. People are asking about like how does drought affect migrating birds, and fire, because those things are happening across the United States. So like there's natural things that impact birds as they migrate. And then there's a lot of human made structures that we're talking about. And I see the question coming up a lot, and we're not experts on this, but people are really wanting to know about wind turbines and migration. And I think that we can say like, yes, there's strikes on wind turbines, but I think what's powerful about BirdCast is now you're seeing when they're coming through. And so you can use that information to inform people that, there's a really big peak migration coming right through where these turbines are. Could you shut them off for this period of time? Is that something that you would hope to be able to do with this information?
Yeah, I think that.
Take it away. No, it's fine. Okay. Well, I mean, essentially, yes, that's one of the hopeful future utilizations of this, both informing where we actually site these wind turbines and then reacting in real time to the bird migration that does happen, yes. But I do think it is important to note, because we often do get questions about wind turbines, is that while we discuss the threat of wind turbines a lot, collisions with buildings and infrastructure in cities, the deaths that occur from that actually outnumber wind turbines by quite a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's all on a scale, right? And so when you're looking at the scale, where you're going to have your biggest impact is with projects like Lights Out.
Essentially, yeah. Because in terms of estimated annual mortality from collision threats to birds, wind turbines number around 350,000 a year, whereas buildings are around 340 million a year.
Yeah.
So there's also like, that said, there's also still a lot of uncertainty that we don't know. For example, with wind farms above the ocean, and then it's very hard to quantify when actually birds die and birds and predators take away the prey. So it's a really hard problem to quantify. And I do think that, and it's all these little things I think that add together, which is why we see that migratory birds especially are not doing too great. Typically they are declining more than sort of other species that are less reliant on migration. So any bit helps. And I do think even for wind farms, there is an opportunity there. And like the great thing is there's not so much birds like to migrate when there actually is not so much wind. They don't like to migrate in very strong wind. So these nice calm nights are when the bulk of the migration happens, and then it's not so costly to turn off a wind farm because then there's not so much power to be made. And so of course it will take a long time because these operators of wind farms need to use bird migration information to do that. But I do believe that there's a possibility there, and to do it more smart.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize also that turning off your lights at home, while it might not feel like a lot, it definitely is an impactful action to take because residences account for some estimated 250 million bird collisions a year. And that's really not an insignificant number. So turning off your lights at home, it's going to matter.
Yeah.
And have a look at your windows also. Like birds also collide during the day. You draw them in maybe with the light, and it continues during the day. So making your windows safe is also another really great thing that goes closely together.
Yeah, and I think that maybe my colleagues that are kind of adding some information into the chat and on Facebook, we do have some links about how to reduce window strikes. In addition to turning off your lights at night, there's other actions that you can take around your home or at your office. If you're lucky enough not unlucky enough to work in an office right now, many of us are remote. But there's a lot of great action steps that people can take. I do want to be cognizant of time. It's 12:59. I love BirdCast gives us a lot of great insights into what's happening in the natural world in a way that maybe most people wouldn't have thought about before, using radar to capture these migrations and to inform policy about lights out and things like that. So I encourage all of our audience to go to the BirdCast website and really explore it and learn how to use it for their own, birding or action that they want to take in their own homes. I think that is a really powerful tool. So I want to thank Adrian and Julia for joining us. It was really fun chatting with you guys.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah. Thanks for everybody.
It was really great. And I feel like I work at the lab, but I just learned a lot. And so I think that I hope our audience learned a lot too. I also realized we did not even put a dip in the bucket of questions. And I'm so sorry, audience, on Zoom and on Facebook, if you didn't get your question answered. You can send questions to us still. So you can send them to cornellbirds@cornell.edu. And BirdCast has a Twitter account. And so you can tweet at Dr. BirdCast, and it's Doctor as in DR BirdCast. I'm assuming that goes to you, Doctor.
Doctor,
Dr. BirdCast.
I'm Doctor, but I'm not only Dr. BirdCast.
So their team can help answer your questions on Twitter, or you can send emails. If you're on Zoom, you'll get a follow-up from me later with the recording to this and information about where to look on the websites and email addresses and all that contact information. And also don't forget the website, birdcast.info. That's our show for today. I really want to thank everyone for joining us, and I hope you're checking out the BirdCast forecast maps throughout this migration season. So thanks again, and happy birding, everyone.
Happy birding. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.